sports note for March 30th, everybody. Happy Easter if you celebrate. And we've currently got the Elite Eight ongoing right now. At the time of this recording, they've just gone to the half between UConn and Illinois. UConn with a 5 point lead at the half. And then later on tonight, do not adjust your sets. Yes, it is going to be college basketball. We've got Clemson and Alabama. And then tomorrow, we've got a couple of dandies. We've got Purdue and Tennessee. And then we've got the Duke Blue Devils taking on the NC State Wolfpack. And the story with just how all of these teams are shaking out, just UConn with their dominance, Marquette coming up short, Houston going out to Duke the other night as the first number one to fall. And there's been no team more surprising right now than the North Carolina State Wolfpack, except when you break it down. The Wolfpack went into the tournament having they lost 4 of their last 14 in the final 6 weeks of the regular season, and then just something within Kevin Keatts' staff just seemed to flip the switch with his players. And now, as it stands, the Wolfpack have won 8 in a row, and they've all come in the postseason. Now, North Carolina State finished 17-14 in the regular season. They were 9-11 in ACC conference play. That was good enough for 10th in the ACC. Now, the ACC was good, but there was no way the 10 teams were going to get in. This was only going to be maybe a 4, maybe 5 bid conference if they were lucky. And that's exactly what it turned out to be. It turned out to be North Carolina, Duke, Virginia, and then NC State. And the reason why NC State got in is NC State got hot at the right time, and then went on a run that I don't think any of us have seen in the postseason, and especially through the NCAA tournament in recent memory, at least in terms of this level of profile. Now, them taking down Boston College in the first round of the ACC tournament, not a huge surprise there. They were favored, but then there was the upset of Syracuse to reach the quarterfinals. Now, Syracuse did actually finish a couple of spots above them. I want to say Syracuse was 7th, but then it was from there things really got interesting. NC State took down Duke in the quarterfinals, and Duke was ranked 11th in the country at that time. Now, the big talk was that if Duke could run the table, could Duke play themselves into a number 1 seed? Could Duke be a number 2 if they advanced far enough and got knocked out by North Carolina? Then it turned into, is NC State going to get in? Probably not. Their profile is still not good enough. At that point, they still hadn't hit 20 wins, again, still sub 500 in conference play. But the main talk turned into would a loss that early in the conference tournament cost Duke a top 4 seed in one of the regions, one of the group of 16 there. And then instead, NC State took down Virginia in the semifinals and then stunned North Carolina in the finals by 8, and ended up winning their first ACC tournament championship since 1987, and that was good enough to get them an 11 seed. And we all know what's actually happened from there. We're going to talk about that here in just a moment, but this was also something that NC State had to jump several teams in front of them, and 3 of those teams were Syracuse, Pitt, and Wake Forest. Now, there was a lot of talk leading into the last couple of days before Selection Sunday a couple of weeks ago of the first 4 in, first 4 out, and a lot of those lists had Syracuse and Pittsburgh in there. So it was definitely in that group of 8. If one of those was going to get in, would they have been a first 4? Would they have been a 12 seed, which is the lowest ranking that you can have for an at-large team? But was this also something that, could potentially NC State get themselves into the finals and have a good enough showing against North Carolina to get themselves in as an at-large and maybe one of those back-end teams? As it turns out, Pitt and Syracuse decided to take their ball and went home, and then they declined to turn the invite to the NIT. Wake Forest ended up going out in the second round, and then it was all on NC State. Now the question was NC State going to get a back end? Were they going to put NC State into those first four games on the Tuesday and Wednesday in Dayton prior to the actual start of the tournament, the official start of the tournament? You can call those first four. You can actually call them whatever you want. They're play-in games, and this is why the tournament should not be expanding to 78, 90, 96, whatever it might be, because then you're actually going to have to start you're going to have to go almost a week longer, and it's going to deny a lot of those smaller schools the opportunity, or you're going to have a back end school like an NC State who's not going to get that chance to possibly shine on the main stage on that Tuesday and Wednesday where everybody's jumping into that. I think we talked about that last week when I came to you guys with the Oakland upset of Kentucky in the first round. But naturally, NC State was going to automatically get in by virtue of winning the conference tournament, but how low would they be seated? Again, they ended up being in 11. They dispatched Texas Tech by 13 in the first round, and then really for them, it almost completely fell away when they actually had a late lead against Oakland, and then Oakland made a quick run, and then NC State couldn't hold that lead. The game ends up going to overtime, and then they outlast Oakland 79-73 in overtime, which then was going to actually set the stage for them to take on second-seeded Marquette. Now, there's a lot of people who thought Marquette would have had a very good opportunity to win that region, with as strong as Marquette had been playing at that point, even though they had not won the Big East tournament. They were the last team to beat UConn with any kind of significance. They had beaten UConn by 30 just a couple of weeks earlier. But NC State at that point, it didn't really matter because Marquette led 5-4 just under 3 minutes into the game, or just over 3 minutes into the game. And then NC State never trailed. NC State went back on top very early and never gave up the lead. There was one point in the second half where NC State was up on Marquette by 16 and decided to back off, and then Marquette finally started to get their threes to fall, which was their Achilles heel in the first half. Whereas this is why Marquette's going home instead of moving on, because they just could not get the shots to fall in the first half. I'm not sure if it had something to do with the goal down at that end, because in the first half it looked like NC State couldn't miss and Marquette couldn't buy a bucket no matter where it was on the floor, despite of how close it conceivably was at the half. And then it was a tale of two halves in the second half. Marquette actually started making everything start falling in the final 10 minutes, and then NC State was starting to think, are we going to possibly let this thing slip away? But Kevin Keatts has actually got something going here, is because their matchup with Duke naturally Duke is looking for revenge. Duke is looking for another Final Four here, and NC State is looking for their first Final Four in a number of years, and you're going to automatically start drawing the comparisons of the 1983 Jim Valvano team that won it all. Unfortunately, this field right now is too deep for NC State to do that. I got to be completely honest here with what you see with UConn. Zach Edey is starting to heat up with Purdue. Tennessee is very good. We saw what Duke did to Houston, and then Clemson and Alabama. I certainly don't want to call them Cinderella stories here in terms of their basketball prowess as opposed to their football prowess. Absolutely. But Alabama was a very good team through most of the year, and then let things fall by the wayside. I want to say that Alabama was actually ranked in the top 5, if not number 1 in the country, earlier on at some point this season. But with NC State, they have a very good inside-outside type game, and then and it's really led by what they call who they affectionately refer to as the two DJs, forward DJ Burns and guard DJ Horn. Now, Horn played 29 minutes and had 19 points last night. Burns played 27 minutes, had 7 assists, 4 rebounds, and only scored 4 points. Had three personal fouls on there. One of 3 NC State players that got into foul trouble yesterday against Marquette, and but it was also he was also the key factor in 2 critical points, one in the first half, one in the second half, and one was having an offensive foul overturned, where it looked like that they were reviewing it during a TV timeout to see if it was possibly a flagrant because he got an elbow or a forearm up trying to establish position. As it turns out, it was overturned because the Marquette player was leaning into his cylinder, so to speak, is what they called it on the TV broadcast on CBS. And it ended up, instead of it being an offensive foul, it ended up being a defensive foul, and could have potentially changed the entire momentum. And then also, Burns went inside and had for a player of his size to be able to have a Kobe Bryant almost type of up and under. DJ Burns is 6'9", 275, and it reminded you a lot of Zion Williamson, with just the creative things and the athletic things he's able to do for a player of his size and his caliber. Middlebrooks had 4 points off the bench for them. O'Connell had 8. Morcell for NC State had 4 fouls, 15 points, which was right behind Horn for tops on the team. Marquette, I'm a Marquette fan, so this one hurt me a little bit. Yes, I will say in the Sweet 16, I took a little bit of a beating. As good as I actually picked the games, because I go round by round in the round of 32, where I only lost 2 games, and then with how I score games, if a game goes to overtime, you kind of take a tie. It's almost like hockey, with the way that I score them. I only lost 2 games outright. I think I only won 2 or 3 games the entire Sweet 16. I called the Alabama win, but I lost on NC State. I lost on Gonzaga over Purdue, and I'm relatively glad that I did. So we've got a great weekend of college hoops ahead. But let me know what you guys think. Who do you guys think are going to be the Final Four when we're all said and done Sunday night? Who do you think is possibly hoisting the trophy in Phoenix next weekend? And Mike and I will be with you on the Wise Guys later on tonight. Take care.